Let's start this video off with a childhood classic of mine. You might have heard of it. Tiny independent film by some rando about dinosaurs in a theme park. I know, really digging deep here, aren't I? There's a scene at night where the electricity goes out and all the characters are stuck on the tram in the middle of a storm. Suddenly, stomps can be heard and they shake the ground with every step, leaving reverberations in a styrofoam cup of water. Then, the metal cables snap and a reptilian body effortlessly breaks the metal cage that held her. She takes a step out, leans forward, and lets out a roar like no other. Yeah! Oops, I mixed things up in the audio mixing. Let me just grab the right one. Here we go.
Boy, do I hate being right all the time.
Jurassic Park was a staple of Hollywood blockbusters during the 90s. It was the beginning of computer graphics becoming a mainstay in special effects productions, a great blend of family-friendly fun and tense thrills, and an excuse for director Steven Spielberg to get a sweaty Jeff Goldblum to go shirtless. Yet, for a young Canadian living in the prairies, it was a source of my utmost fascination with giant monsters, and to filmmaking in general. I became obsessed with learning everything about dinosaurs. But who am I kidding? Every kid most definitely had a dinosaur phase. Yet, also as the weird kid, I take things a step further. What if that dinosaur shot a beam of death from its mouth, and also had its own generation-defining howl? Oh crap, I missed that one too. Hang tight for a quick second. Soon enough as my tour with Jurassic Park and dinosaurs in general just ended.
After careful consideration, I've decided not to endorse your park. So have I.
I slowly got into the world of Japanese monsters, or kaiju as they are commonly called. Monsters as tall as skyscrapers, taking their frustrations on human society and turning their precious landmarks into Lincoln Logs. They fought other monsters of similar destructive powers in matches. That would be the 1,000-ton parallel to worldwide wrestling, complete with drop kicks. Now, no doubt, these are the corniest and cheapest movies you'll ever see. But they were kind of influential in making kids like me discover international films outside of our sphere of influence.
Mommy, let's go see Godzilla.
Child, we're not going to a zoo. Hurry.
Laughable dubs aside, it was a big surprise for us to discover that not just North America produced films and television shows, which would then be a stepping stone to appreciating foreign art. Everyone knows that there has been now an increase of people just watching films with subtitles. Well, who's to say it wasn't because of films like this? I know, the quality is crap, but the entertainment was satisfying to a young kid like me. I had a birthday party at 10 years old where my parents got me a Godzilla birthday cake. We played Godzilla Saves the Earth on the Xbox, and we all had a sleepover watching Godzilla Final Wars on my old television screen. I was, with no sarcasm, the coolest kid in town, watching this with 9 other people who had zero interest in it.
Ozaki, get a grip. We're going in.
Back in the 2000s, no one cared much for Godzilla. But now, with the release of the MonsterVerse series produced by Legendary, kaiju has never been more financially successful. Yet, I'm not going to talk about them, because truthfully, I don't have much attachment to them. I don't even have the fond regard for the other eras of the Godzilla franchise, such as the Heisei or Millennium. My era of Godzilla was always Showa, which for those uninformed is based on the ruling Japanese emperor at that time, hence why it is called that. Showa-era Godzilla is a bizarre period, the highest of highs and the lowest of the lows. It didn't have the phenomenal effects of the Heisei era, nor the whatever the Millennium era had going for it. It can be best described as a coming-of-age spree of films grappling with looming financial debt and a changing Japanese entertainment landscape, turning a metaphor for the corruption of nature due to mankind's lust for nuclear warfare into a heroic mascot of tacky affairs and chintzy decisions, where filmmakers made their mark on the history of cinema before having to retract themselves due to creative burnout on said mark. I adore the Showa era. I know, I'm crazy. Even getting the Criterion booklet that houses so much behind the scenes knowledge, yet I am well aware there are plenty and plenty of Godzilla film essays online that would be big enough to create their own kaiju. So for what I'm making, this video series is a retrospective of how I viewed the Godzilla series, starting from the first film in 1954, all the way to the end of the first era movie line with Terror of Mechagodzilla. This will be put into chunks for your viewing pleasure, and it will most certainly be one filled with interest, but also a loving send back to why I got into it when I was younger, and what persists to now. And yes, even the bad stuff will get recognized. So let's not waste any time. The sirens are going off, and your Geiger counters are activated. It's Godzilla o'clock in this bitch. Now, in terms of kaiju movies, or giant monster films, Godzilla wasn't the first. In 1934, a lost-to-time Japanese movie called The Great Buddha Arrival would be considered the first of its kind, which is tokusatsu on film. Tokusatsu is made up of several different artistic expressions and would be utilized in its early years in kabuki theater and bunraku, or puppet theater in Japan. This would then be applied to Japanese films after King Kong was released in 1933, giving a man named Eiji Tsuburaya to pioneer tokusatsu in his work. This earned him the title of Father of Tokusatsu, as he collaborated with well-known craftsmen to invent miniature sets and models for use in both feature films and military propaganda. And then, the biggest bomb at the known time was dropped twice.
A short time ago, an American airplane dropped one bomb on Hiroshima and destroyed its usefulness to the enemy.
After the atomic bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, several Japanese filmmakers involved with creating propaganda films were purged by the Allied occupation of Japan, including Tsuburaya, and had to go uncredited for several films produced afterwards. At around the same time, giant monster movies were becoming a new trend, such as 1953's The Beast from 20,000 Fathoms, which a person named Tomoyuki Tanaka became inspired by. In the real world, an incident involving a tuna fishing boat and the United States Castle Bravo weapon test at Bikini Atoll was contaminated with radiation, causing massive outcry from Japanese society that were becoming more anti-nuclear. For Tanaka, who was taking a plane back to Japan after being declined to direct a film in Jakarta, he would then craft a story about a monster awakened by nuclear radiation, taking his vengeance on a populated area. When it came to the naming of the prehistoric reptile, accounts kind of vary. Gojira is a combination of the Japanese words for gorilla and whale, but sources such as Toho president Hiro Matsuoka would claim during an interview with CinemaCon, inspiration came from another Toho employee who had an unusual nickname. He was a big guy. He was a mixture of the whale and gorilla in Japanese. Yet other accounts, such as with director of Godzilla Ishiro Honda's widow, would deny that story in an unauthorized biography. I expect the monster's name was thought up after very careful discussions between Mr. Tanaka, Mr. Tsuburaya, and my husband. I am sure they would have given the matter considerable thought. The backstage boys at Toho love to joke around with tall tales, but I don't believe that one. A giant monster embodying a nation's attitude and apathy to human-made weapons of mass destruction would be the perfect thing to put audiences in seats. Releasing in 1954, the movie is all about a radioactive monster dubbed Gojira bursting from the sea and destroying several ships. Locals believe the cause is an ancient sea creature, which the mainland cannot believe, but oh no, it turns out is real. Livestock, ships, and more are destroyed until the irradiated dinosaur the size of an Arc de Triomphe wreaks havoc in Tokyo. People running, atomic breaths aplenty, and a man in a rubber suit going around smashing models and turning into a Mr. Rogers hand puppet. Yeah, not all the special effects look great on a rewatch. Nothing seems to stop the creature, but one scientist named Dr. Daisuke Serizawa has a weapon that could successfully kill it, yet is quite hesitant to do so, as it would mean creating more super weapons of its kind being used in warfare. To stop that from ever happening, he burns his notes, gets into a diving suit, and activates his super weapon, taking him and Godzilla to their grave. And nothing ever became of that super weapon, Ever again. Ever again. On a side note, ever heard about the definition of foreshadowing? So the way I would describe Godzilla is somewhat melancholy. The movie is not cheerful in its presentation, nor does it shine brightly on the hopes of humanity. Rather, it plays into the consequences of human interference on nature. At the conclusion of the film's showing, star Akira Takarada was taken aback by the audience reaction to it, many who would have had collective trauma of the nuclear holocaust caused by atomic weapons. When I first saw Godzilla at the studio screening, I couldn't help crying when I watched Godzilla become a skeleton. I thought, why did mankind have to punish Godzilla like that? Mankind seemed like a bigger villain than Godzilla, and I felt sorry for him. If Godzilla was truly evil, people wouldn't have loved him so much. We were responsible for triggering Godzilla's violence. Much of Godzilla's characteristics emphasize his confused state, knocking around and battering trees, city blocks, and boats without coordination or pathos. He feels rage of what he has become, so he lashes out unknowingly the closest thing in proximity, who all still go through their own trauma from both occupation and the aftermath of radiation. Although that could also be that being in a goddamn suit was a nightmare for that person inside, and he just needed to get the f out of it. The suit weighed 220 pounds, and actors Haruhi Nakajima and Katsumi Tezuka had to wear this cumbersome bastard for several hours on end, and considering human sweat, that's another extra weight on top of that. Suitmation is not all that's cracked up to be. These guys are just built different. Watching the original Godzilla again is interesting compared to his sequels or remakes, as much derision comes from how lackluster the human characters can be in those films. Now, the 1954 version doesn't also have strong developed personalities. Like, come on, the main male human character and his female love interest. He was a boy, she was a girl, can I make it any more obvious? The rest are mostly just military personnel, government officials, and scientists in boardroom meetings discussing what Godzilla is or what to do to stop him. There are essentially two that kind of stand out. One that wants no one to hurt the monster and feels genuine sorrow for the state of affairs happening around him.
ゴジラを殺すことばかり考えて、なぜ物理衛生学の立場から研究しようとしないんだ?
And Serizawa, the man who creates the oxygen destroyer to kill Godzilla. He also has a fractured relationship with the love interest, but his mysterious nature, coupled with scars from participating in World War II, makes for a compelling relationship between the man and the beast with a fiery breath.
もしも一旦このオキシジェンデストロイヤーを使ったら最後、世界の為政者たちが黙って見ているはずがないんだ。必ずこれを武器として使用するに決まっている。
Both harboring destructive power that are dark manifestations in this new world order. I could pick out many scenes that I can highlight, such as the scene with the mother and her children waiting for death as Godzilla rampages towards them. Or the radio host in what would be his final broadcast. Then there's a scene with Serizawa unveiling the secret behind his oxygen destroyers as love interest, a display of how terrifying mankind's need to invent new ways of killing drags us away from our humanity. Of course, Godzilla 1954 might be doom and gloom, but it isn't without some hilarious goofs. I'm sure the observant of you can pick out the strings on certain props, like the jets firing on Godzilla, or some of the compositing shots where the layering is noticeably there, but pretty impressive at the time. However, then there is that puppet, and the use of it makes up probably a good third of the effects shown in the film. Not gonna lie, it looks really bad. Almost looks like a puppet from that old Winnie the Pooh Disney Playhouse series.
They should know, don't never get away with it, 'cause Stripey makes snarl.
But age like Milk Muppet aside, Godzilla proved to be a hit in his home country financially, if a bit mixed from film critics. When it came to the overall goal of the feature, Honda felt that he didn't accomplish what he and the producers wanted. Many young viewers didn't have any first-hand knowledge or dim memories of the war. As strange as this sounds, I think the film succeeded because I didn't completely succeed as a director. It represents only 65% of what I wanted to achieve. Since I fell 35% short, audiences could see it wasn't a real story. When it comes to its international release, it was edited significantly for American audiences, and some consider that Godzilla became less of a message about nuclear weapons and more a product of the Red Scare that was gaining influence in the United States at the time. This can be especially seen in their sci-fi films, where the alien monsters are a not so subtle metaphor for communism.
They have to be destroyed, all of them!
They will be. Every one of them.
This included accusations of deleting several references to the damage done by the atomic bombs.
せっかく長崎の原爆から命拾いしてきた大切な体なんだもの。
そろそろ疎開先でも探すとするかな。ああ、また疎開か。まったく嫌だな。
And ending less on a somber note and more of a good triumphs over evil ending, typical of American monster movies. Raymond Burr would become the central character and would narrate over what is going on in front of him, kind of like War of the Worlds style commentary, but with the aggressiveness of, say, those streaming services spelling out everything in their film scripts nowadays.
George, the tanks have been wiped out by a wall of flames. Neither man nor his machines are able to stop this creature.
60 Minutes would therefore be left intact of the original version, and for a while, this was the only way to watch Godzilla on home media. Luckily, the version I grew up watching was the original, and looking back at it now, it still feels a bit weird looking at sequences in it that would become tropes for Japanese monster movies overall. Destruction scenes of fake models, boardroom meetings, scientists inventing new weapons to defeat a bigger weapon, and a glorification of the Japanese self-defense force. The latter is more than likely because of the crew's involvement with their output of war propaganda films during World War II. Director Honda was even a prominent soldier during Japan's campaign in China, but without accurate accounts of his military history, events such as Nanking or during his time guarding comfort stations are questionable in whether or not he had a strained relationship with warfare or just military patriotism. The JSDF would feature prominently throughout the Showa era, mostly as fodder for the monsters to smush and stomp on. But it could also be more or less a byproduct of increased nationalism during post-war time, as well as conflicts in Korea and Vietnam. Yet surprisingly, the heroes in all the films are not military soldiers, but scientists or reporters. Now, with all that implied, is Godzilla pro-military? It's pretty obvious, especially when you take a closer lens at the latest version. In conclusion, Gojira made his stomp on film history, with a stellar soundtrack, inventive practical effects, except for that one, and providing us with a cinema-worthy battle cry. Wait, I cannot believe I did this a third time. Alright, I fixed it. Better. And since our titular creature is merely just a skeleton in the ocean now, there is no need to make a sequel. I mean, he's dead.
From a certain point of view.
A certain point of view?
Hi there! Just wanted to give a quick shout out to everybody watching that if you enjoy this video but want to see the uncut version, then it'll be available on my Patreon account, usually up a day or two ahead of the official release on YouTube. Just go to my Patreon and become a patron. Thanks so much for watching. Let's get back to the video. Oh god, not this film. Looking for a Godzilla film more effective than melatonin for sleep insomnia? Well, I've got the perfect sleep aid for you. Godzilla Raids Again didn't even take a whole year to complete, releasing in the theaters just 6 months after the first. Tanaka was impatient to make another one after the first success, to strike while the iron was hot, or in this case, radioactive. Yet there are some noticeable problems. Honda was busy directing another film that year. The first film's composer was unavailable, and every carefully planned shot had to be streamlined into something more akin to how B-movies were produced, like how that producer in Tim Burton's Ed Wood would say it.
Is there a script?
No, but there's a poster.
Enter into the picture Motoyoshi Oda as the low-effort studio director, a fresh-off-the-boat composer named Masaru Sato, and a script less about drawing allegories to nuclear destruction and more a gigantified version of a B-movie monster mash, with new kaiju named Anguirus coming in to battle Godzilla. But even then, the giant Anguillus would be put down halfway through the feature film, and then you're left with a film dragging its feet. Up until Godzilla gets encased in ice to stop his path of destruction, everything just slogs along. And that's probably because the script is so paper-thinned that it needs to add in filler to compensate. In fact, a good portion of Godzilla and Anguillus' fight in Osaka has a bunch of criminals escaping from a prison vehicle, kind of running around and then causing such chaos that it brought the monsters to the bay. Yeah, they focus on this plot point for like 10 minutes and it does not go anywhere. All the while, there's a really boring melodramatic human plot going on that makes you question why this film is even this long to begin with. Even the fight between the two monsters isn't exactly well done, especially when you see how clearly inconsistent it gets. Now, it's pretty normal in filmmaking to slow the speed of video down slightly when the target is pretty big. That's why it was effective when Godzilla was walking around Tokyo in the original film. And the cinematography helped sell the illusion of a large aquatic lizard making his way throughout. That film was very well crafted, whereas this film doesn't have that same luxury. The suit actors now appear to move much faster, more rubbery, partially because there was an error in the cameras capturing the frames at a slower speed. There has never been an official reason as to why, but apparently Tsuburaya didn't order a reshoot and was quoted in saying this based on Arakawa's recollection. Wait a minute, that movement's not that bad. Maybe we can use it. Ever since that incident, we've used different camera speeds in different scenes. Now, I don't want to put salt in the open wound, since I do think there can be nice sequences, such as when the fight goes to that classic Osaka castle. Given the limited time the special effects team had, it actually turned out quite well, all things considered. Also, gotta give a shout out to everyone's favorite underdog, Anguillopolis, or Anguirus as he's later called. I love me some monsters on 2 feet, but there is always this uniqueness when monsters are pictured on all fours. It's like Pokemon. They just look aesthetically cooler when they aren't just bipedal. Looking at you, Rhydon. Now, while Anguirus might be an underrated kaiju in the hearts of many, after he gets nuked by Godzilla, all you have left is a molasses of a picture, probably because of how uninspired and by the books it plays it. Like, I do not care for these pilots, nor their will they won't they romances, even when one of them crashes into a mountain. Also, this shot from a high vantage point is just another reason why this entire production was rushed to hell. Maybe you can get a kick out of the jets blowing up the snowy mountain ranges, but it is neither poetic nor is it entertaining. It's just mediocre. No wonder the Americans called it Gigantus a fire monster for I don't know why. And apparently, I was not the only one that kind of felt the same way, because this movie didn't really sell as much as the previous, with Arakawa pointing out something was missing when we wrapped up Godzilla Raids Again. At the staff pre-release screening, people were talking about the first Godzilla movie. I feel like the only contribution this movie has had in our collective consciousness of Godzilla was in this analog horror series on YouTube about the man in the suit. It's absolutely creepy, definitely check it out. You're gonna want to watch this with the lights off. Even when going back to watch these movies again, I can't help but feel like the second movie in the franchise had the misfortune of trying to follow up the original's success, but at a cheaper rate. It's sort of like Son of Kong, sequel to the original, rushed to theaters in the exact same year, and not taken seriously enough to fix its shortcomings. You know, if I was a scummy studio producer, I would get a lot of money if I put these two monsters against each other. No holds bar brawl that would define cinematic giant monster history for years to come. Yes, let's have King Kong fight Frankenstein's monster. Wait, what the fuck? The idea of a giant ape versus literature's greatest living corpse was initially proposed by, of all people, the guy who did the groundbreaking stop motion of King Kong, Willis O'Brien. The legendary effects auteur was nearing the end of his career, but wanted to revive King Kong and face off against a new Frankenstein's monster in the thickness of the African jungle. This would all culminate in a one-on-one in the heart of San Francisco, and even had Frankenstein's monster riding a cable car. Of course, this idea wouldn't go to waste. It's just that there was this one guy named John Beck. And John Beck found the idea so tantalizing that he took the golden ball of an idea with him, sold it off, and left O'Brien burned.
I love everything about your plan, except for one thing. You.
According to Don Shea, Obi was heartbroken. All the time, effort, and expense of developing a story had come to less than nothing. Toho Studios leapt at the idea of combining both the American monster and their Japanese monster for use in their filmography. And since Beck couldn't find an American film studio to take this idea, Toho got it in the end. They had complete license of King Kong's likeness for use in their upcoming projects. Until 1966, that day is important. Having both monsters side by side seemed like destiny to Tsuburaya, since King Kong was partially responsible for the creation of Godzilla. And there seemed to be unique parallels between the creatures, even if Kong was more a metaphor for colonialism than a riff on nuclear inventions of war. So Frankenstein was swapped out with Godzilla, and thus began production. Don't worry, Frankenstein, you'll get your own movie one day. So will your Harry's Spawns too. Monster movies are fun. Now, one of the big reasons many studios didn't want to pick up the old idea was simply because it required stop-motion animation, which is, well, if you've seen how it is from watching those behind-the-scenes of Studio Laika, you'll probably know why. Or maybe from this South Park clip.
Okay, the shot is finally set up. Now shoot the O-mouth for 2 frames.
So the decision was made to put Kong into a rubber suit, which must have been a death blow to O'Brien, as he would not be credited for the idea when it all was finally put together, and would pass away shortly after, with his wife citing that studio deal to be the cause. Good old John Beck is sure burning in hell for that bit of indecency. Lawsuits put aside, I do think the mere idea of using King Kong as a marketing push is beyond hysterical, considering the costume they made for the monkey is... oh boy. They apparently had several suits made for the Kong costume, and this was what they ended up with. Derpy mouth, weird looking arms, and just the goofiness of the actor's performance. This is a dumb costume, maybe more so than Godzilla's, who has this weird thing going on with his hands, which I can only describe as a precursor to DX's suck it gesture.
Oh, let's get ready to suck it!
Wrestling in Godzilla seems like the most logical step if we're going to be serious here, and that's not without good reason. By the time King Kong vs. Godzilla came out, much of Japan was experiencing an economic resurgence, and entertainment was starting to really take shape, meaning that the heavy drama and symbolism Godzilla represented was slowly backing away into a more sanitized and audience-pleasing figure of pop schlock. After all, Godzilla wasn't as popular as King Kong, so he was de facto villain of the picture. Even the film overall is different from the previous two, as it was more lighthearted and commercialized, something many critics have contention with. You can almost feel how many people would have had negative attitudes to the motion picture if you saw the American version. The main plot is centered around a pharmaceutical company trying to use King Kong for a marketing campaign and steal all the credit from Godzilla on the tabloids. So a match is proposed against the wishes of every sane person in Japan, and both monsters go on a maddening spree of destruction. Actually, much of the movie is just trying to get Kong to fight Godzilla. It sees the thing breathe fire one time and just nopes the hell out of the first fight. This matchup is like putting a middleweight against a heavyweight who exudes radiation. That is, until Kong eats a bunch of electrical wires and gains electricity powers, then is sedated, dropped on a mountain face, he toboggans down the hill and knocks Godzilla right on his scaly ass. Oh, this is fun but dumb. If you can't see the comedy behind the ridiculousness, you are missing out on pure, cheesy fun. Also love the idea of electricity powering up King Kong, and that's just a trait picked up from when the script was supposed to feature Frankenstein's monster. Now, if we take the big fight out of it, there are some other highlights. There's this actor who plays the pharmaceutical president who plays a role of a bumbling, incompetent higher-up quite well. And the fight against the octopus was well done for its time, although I'm not huge on the behind-the-scenes reality of what happened to it afterwards. The movie, in its original form, was kind of a critique of the excessive greed plaguing Japanese entertainment, and it also serves as Honda and writer Shinichi Sakazawa's sly remarks about how television was rotting everyone's brains.
No more! I'm sick of Godzilla!
The irony, however, is that this also affected giant monsters like Godzilla, who had become the very antithesis of his creation. Merely a rubber prop to sell movie tickets to an audience that has forgotten what the lizard stood for. I also find it interesting that Kong is put into a situation just as similar to his feature film, where he is being put on display for audiences as a publicity stunt representing human avarice, this time on the television screen. The movie was also Tsuburai's best work he's ever put in when it comes to using suitmation, pyrotechnics, and optical effects, all while Honda's direction makes it feel like a fun time for everyone. Heck, it's even the first Godzilla film to be in color. Well, at least when you omit the fact that this film was originally supposed to be Willis O'Brien's credits, which, yeah, that was a pretty dick move. Now, the American version is something I had to mention, as the Japanese cut was almost lost to time until most recently. This version of the film was more widely viewed, and has a reputation of being just another campy B-movie with added in English scenes, juxtaposed with footage from the original. Most of the time, it's just news reporters doing dissertations of science mumbo-jumbo, or several shorthanded dub lines to make it more appealing to American audiences, with some degree of hilarity.
Oh, God! That's you too, Pharaoh!
Here, hold this.
Even the way the movie ends was contended for a long time on different magazines, though it looks like many sources declare that it was King Kong who won in the end. Good thing Godzilla came back a few decades later to run it back. The movie proved to be a successful boost for the company, and was the start of a whole new era of monster movies where instead of focusing on a singular entity, it would be giant against giant on large sets with radical super beams and tons of Foley sounds. Just ignore the sound of Godzilla's testicles clapping when he hits his stomach. Yeah, what maybe is the tragic aftermath of King Kong vs. Godzilla is not that the radioactive dinosaur was defeated by a goofy-looking guy in a gorilla suit. It was that the meaning behind the monster was sacrificed. And no one knew that better than its director. As he puts it in an interview with Tokyo Journal, there was a huge fall in the average age of Godzilla fans. So Toho decided it would be a good idea to make him more heroic and less scary. I didn't like the idea, but I couldn't really oppose it. Once he made a film, it became company property. Godzilla would continue to star in more movies, more fights, and more goofy shenanigans. Although despite that, it would seem that Godzilla became more of an excuse to display destruction and chaos as fun and crowd-pleasing. It's something that even newer films have to recapture again, especially after movies like Oppenheimer brought focus back to the public on the dangers of warfare and its effects on civilian populations. Yet the more you try to inform the public, the more you also glorify it. As we close this chapter, I think this quote from Honda right before he passed away sums up his feelings of Godzilla works in general. No matter how many Godzilla movies are produced, it is never enough to explain the theme of Godzilla.